Hey, good afternoon. I know since we're putting this out through the entire footprint, I have 1335, but I know this could be a lot of different times across the footprint. So I appreciate for those who could break away for a few minutes. And we're going to keep this to less than 30 minutes because if anything more than that, you're going to shut down. Actually, there's a couple of you right now that's already pushing across the shutdown period right now, so I don't mind. All I ask you to do is when your head hits the table, have something pad so it's not so loud that you disrupt. All right, there we go. So I want to start off with a little bit of disclaimer because when we did this last time, it was actually from a recruiter who actually said, you know, sir, if instead of doing things locally, how about you just tape it, put it on YouTube? And as soon as he said the word YouTube, I started getting extremely nervous because I wasn't worried about what I say because at this point I can regulate myself. I was more worried about what you were going to do with that on YouTube, and when you pushed it out, you guys can splice all types of stuff. But, you know, he had a good point. He said, sir, you know, I might see you once a year. If you're able to come to my ATC, I might see you. I'm in a small two-person center, and I'm out in Hawaii. Now, you can come if you would like to come, but for the most part, I'm not going to see you your entire tenure, but maybe once a year when I come to the mainland when I have ATC. So he had a very good point for us to be able to do this, push it out. And I would like to try to do that a little bit more often for our professional development. Now, I am open for topics, but I will want to do a little disclaimer. I got a little feedback, not all good, of our last little pulling on the rope type because I didn't start off by saying, I'm not talking about anyone. It was funny, I had some folks upset with me because they thought that I was really using their name but not using their name, and it was a little funny. I think my grandmother used to have this saying that I didn't understand until an adult, that it's only the hit dog that's going to holler in the pack. And I'm like, what the world does that mean? Well, you throw a rock, the only one that yells is when a guy hit. So maybe that you felt that I was talking about you, but guys on a personal level and a professional level, that was not the case. There was no one person that I was referring to. It was just that doing this for a few times in the last 20 years, you know, I have been one of the guys pulling on the rope and felt that not everybody was pulling. Actually, I'll admit to you, there's a couple times that I've been on the rope and I've been a strap hanger and I wasn't pulling. So it was for me just as much as it was for the group. So when we talk about what we talk about today, it's the same thing. So I do have notes for the most folks that are out there that's heard me speak before. This is a rarity. I don't like to do this, but then everyone, Doug Lomchek's not here, but he'll say that that's the most riskiest thing you could ever do is put me up in front of anybody and start talking with at least saying, okay, or a bunch of chaplains. That's pretty good because if you got chaplains in the audience, you always got to do better than them. And the bottom line is if I say I got a 3-point sermon, I'm going to stick to my 3 points and I am going to get you out of here in time for lunch. So I've got a little critique going on here of the chaplains in the room. Vince Lombardi. I want to start with a quote from Vince Lombardi. He actually stated that we would accomplish many more things if we would not think of them as impossible. The title of today's conversation is about homework versus impossible. I like homework because I still got 2 teenagers in the house, and that's my daily struggle is homework, getting the homework. And we also talk about why they don't do well in certain subjects. Well, it's just impossible. And I always relate the homework and the impossible together. How much is impossible because you don't do your homework? Although that's not really how we're going to frame this today, it was a really good thing that had nothing to do with each other, so I wanted to keep you guessing. Vince Lombardi. I want to read this to you from Steve Coates. So I try not to read too much to you, but this one's pretty good because he's self-assessing. Have you ever heard of other people complain about the size of the goals that they have to actually achieve at work? There have been times in my past when I was certainly one of them. I figured if I was lucky enough to get someone to take poor pity on little old me, my objectives might be reduced, whether it was really too big or not. It might make it easier to exceed, which could result in a bigger bonus, or at least make it easier and less stressful to reach. Over the years, I have known or worked with many who are able to turn this crafty complaining ritual into an art. Steve Coates. You know, as I read that in one of my devotions, I'm thinking, you know, wow, have not I done that personally in my past? Yes, I have. You know, I might not have the fortitude to maybe reach up to my boss and tell my boss that there's no way I can do this and look for pity across the board, but I have sat across the breakfast table with a cup of coffee in my hand and had that conversation with my spouse. Looking for sympathy of how hard work is, working for sympathy of who my boss is, who's working for me, my goodness, poor old me. Unfortunately, after 20 years, I still get the same response. So the insanity of doing the same thing over and over and over, looking for a different response, not getting it, because I say that and I get the same response of, suck it up, cupcake. But maybe it's a reality check. I need to get it out of my system. It sounds good to say, and it's good to have bounce that off someone who can actually knows me more than anyone in the world. And I think the Sergeant Major's getting close, the time that we spend together. And he has told me to suck it up, sir, a couple times too. So he's getting good at that. How many times are we looking at what's impossible and even the things that we do personally to minimize holding ourselves accountable on a personal level, internal? What's impossible? Now, I was going to pick on Al, but I don't see him here today, so I'll just keep this kind of calm because no one else I have the courage to pick on like that because I got a couple in here that might take me out. Anyone in here, by a show of hands, that was alive during the time that we broke the sound barrier? Okay, nobody would admit it. I'm on a plane a lot now. Why are you shaking your head? I wasn't looking at you. That's pretty good. Oh, I'm not me. Being as much flying that I do now, there's been a couple times that I've hit some air pockets that pretty had me grabbing, and I've actually taken off from airplanes in airplanes more than I've landed in them. So I don't mind being in an aircraft, but if the chute's not strapped on your back, and then some of that turbulence gets you kind of thinking about flight. And I started thinking about the sound barrier the other day and how impossible that at once was. That cannot happen. Why do you think it's called a barrier? It's something that cannot be overcome. And it actually was, to the point. But I think about who was in the aircraft, flying the aircraft as it got closer and closer and closer. That if I think it's bad sitting in an aircraft right now that has a little bit of turbulence, can you imagine being in an aircraft that was closing the gap of breaking the sound barrier? Can only imagine that the entire airframe was never meant for something like that. And the sheer force on that airframe and how the entire airframe, the feeling of the person flying it is that it is about to come apart. Now, I'm a Trekkie, I apologize. And I love the piece where Sulu was told as a captain when they were trying to go rescue their comrades, and he kept pushing the aircraft further and further, and one of the engineers said, "She is going to break apart." And his comment was, "Then fly her apart then." So that whole mindset of, and then all of a sudden this impossible was broken. Still didn't make it easy. Not much easier for the next person to come and break it, but the impossible was broken. What was the mindset change of the individual pilot that felt that this was undoable versus doable as compared to the pilot who's willing to get in the aircraft and say what they're willing to put on the line, that if this is not doable, and they could lose their life? How we see impossible. I will tell you this, people will not devote much energy to what they think is impossible. We see in our formation right now, how much of our mission that we look at in recruiting right now that is looked at, well, that is an impossible mission. It just cannot be done. And I don't care how much I say, leaders say, I don't care what the market will say. There's no matter what else anyone will say, if the individual believes it is an impossible task, they will not devote much energy to it. I had a conversation with a Catholic priest yesterday who runs one of the priests who runs a spec cat, and if I look at any of our mission that I think is most difficult, one of them is the Catholic priest mission. When you really break down the market, break down the numbers, and really look at how many there are. That chaplain was not discouraged in the slightest. He felt his mission was doable, and he was telling me that they were going to succeed. And it was not disillusionment either. This was an individual that did not see it as impossible. He saw it as difficult. Why do people act on the impossible? What makes that chaplain? What makes that chaplain act on that? What makes that pilot get in that aircraft? What makes that person go after what everyone else would normally say that cannot be done? What is it? Two items. There are some of you, and I enjoy working with you because the only time you'll hear me say the word stubborn with my a smile on my face is that you are stubbornly unwilling to accept the fact that the task is impossible, therefore you act. Stubbornly unwilling to accept. Now, as a trait in my child, sometimes that's not a positive attribute. But if he's trying to ride a bike, absolutely. So the attribute itself is extremely valuable. Another reason why someone acts on the impossible is because they feel there are no other choices. A couple of these as you can think of is unwilling to accept the fact that the task is impossible. Think about Orville and Wilbur. I mean, I look back at of what we knew at that time to see what is doable. That was undoable. How many tries did it take? And what did they measure success? The first flight? Anybody remember how far it actually got off the ground and stayed? It was a matter of seconds. It was very short. We look at that was not success. No, it was. A matter of feet and a matter of seconds was successful. Because you have to start somewhere with the impossible. How many filaments did Edison go through before he figured out the right one? Where did he start? Was he discouraged because it might mean one more try? Tackling a goal that is currently considered impossible is not an easy course to take. Not on a personal level, but among you and your peers. Every day, these people must accept the risk of looking like a failure and even a fool. You must demonstrate courage, and you must experiment over and over and over. You must look at your work from every angle possible. And I will guarantee you one constant. If it did not work yesterday, there's a pretty good chance it will not work today. There's a reason that you learn from this experience, because you learn, you become resilient. All of this hard work is the reason why a lot of passion, devotion is what's required out of that individual, because that is an internal drive. Without that internal drive, that will dry up very quickly. Is that you? Or failing to act will lead to devastating consequences. Failure is not an option. Could be you. Since I'm an 80s kid, I still remember news from the 80s. That's funny, and my children look at me like, I don't remember that. I got some adults I don't really remember this. Anybody remember 1989 in Sioux City, Iowa? United Airline, anyone? The plane that didn't crash, that landed because all hydraulics had went out and they could not fly nor land a plane with no hydraulics. Prior to that day, there's never been a time in history that they have landed that type of aircraft with no hydraulics. That's impossible. No one perished. They landed the plane because what was the option? Since none of you are around with a sound barrier, which we'll check, I'm wondering. Apollo 13. You know, what was put in the movie was just very minor compared to the items that kept going wrong. You just couldn't put them all in the movie and get it done in 3 hours. I mean, it was one impossible situation after another, and somehow, through sheer determination of the human will, they figured it out. Now, you might not look at our mission as devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, I see my mission and our mission failure as devastating. The day I do not have a chaplain that can be in Afghanistan or Iraq, wherever we need to be, for the sons and daughters that are willing to sacrifice their life for what our freedom stands for, where our nation sends them in harm's way, and I don't have a chaplain that can be right there when they need a chaplain, is devastating. When I can't take care of a soldier off the battlefield and save their life, to bring them back to their mother and father, to their sons and daughters, to their spouse. Because I don't have the right skill set, I don't have the right experience, and I don't have enough of a type of physician. Our mission is devastating if not met. Because you can contract out all you want here at Ireland Community Hospital to send everyone downtown, Elizabethtown, or wherever you are right now. If you don't have enough doctors in Brooke Army Medical Center, yes, you can send them to San Antonio, but you cannot send them downtown Baghdad for their care. So how are you framing the mission? I think that we need to do two things. We need to question our ability to succeed, and I strongly feel that we need to reshape our beliefs. Dr. Danzig. Dr. Danzig died in 2008. He is a renowned mathematician, went through University of Berkeley in the late 30s. And why he's renowned, as a student, he's just like us. I love to do this. If you've not been in the military before, this doesn't really translate, but if you are, he had a feeling that some of us have had before, but you're unwilling to admit, the emotion that is incurred when you miss movement. I wish the cameras could see what I saw here in the audience with some of the military folks, and all of a sudden they bristled. Missed movement. He missed movement. He was in his doctorate program. He got up late for class one day, still ran to the class. It had already been dismissed. Class was over. In his doctorate program, PhD. Walked in, very similar to a room like this, looked up, clearly not that type of blackboard. If you don't know what that is, you can ask. I'll stop. We'll ask Al. On the blackboard, he saw two problems. He was very devastated. He assumed that they were homework problems. He wrote them down, and he went back home to do those homework problems because clearly I missed class. I got to turn these in. Usually homework is done, turn it in the next day, and he couldn't get it done in time. He'd spent all that time trying to fix these problems, to solve these problems. He couldn't solve them. I mean, all he could think about is how difficult these problems are. And it took him a few more days to finish the problems. So when he got finished with the homework, he took it back in to his professor, just almost in the mindset like we would beg him to please accept my homework. I know it's late. I know I'd missed class, but would you please accept my homework? And he got the same feeling that we got when we finally get to the field after we've missed movement, and we see the first sergeant, and he says, "I'll talk to you later." The professor said, "Just put it there on my desk." And any of you who've been in my office, you know what my desk looks like. So if I ever told you to put something on my desk, you would have the same feeling. Well, that's never getting looked at. So he left discouraged. A few days later, 8 o'clock in the morning, him and his spouse are in the bed. All of a sudden, there's this banging on the door, waking them up at 8 o'clock in the morning. Who in the world? Banging, banging. At the door was the professor with his homework in hand and said, "Do you know what you did?" Well, clearly my first thoughts would be, I'm not a math whiz, would be, is it that bad that you would come to my house? Those were not homework problems. Those were the two known unsolvable statistical problems in math. You solved the first problem. I've written it up. Can we publish this? Why did he solve that? How could he have solved it? He's a student. All of the brains in the world could not figure out that problem, and he solved it. How? He didn't know it was impossible. He didn't know it was unsolvable. If there was a heading on top of that, when he walked in there and on the blackboard it said, "The two unsolvable problem sets and statistics," do you think he would have went home and tried to solve them just because he missed class to try to be a suck up? I doubt it. What he saw and what he assumed, so he had no belief that he could not do it. So his ability to succeed was framed by not knowing it was impossible. It doesn't stop there, because near the end of that coursework, he's struggling to find out what am I going to do for my dissertation, and he's pulling his hair out what topic, and that professor's like, oh no, don't worry about it, just take those two homework things, staple them together, turn them in. I'll take that for your dissertation now. That's a PhD program I want to be a part of, my homework of my dissertation. So he did, submitted it, went on about his business. Fast forward to 1950, 1952, totally unrelated, another math whiz, again, like I said, not I or my children, had solved one of the problems in statistics, and he was about to publish it. He was all excited, and the assistant comes in and says, I think we have a problem. Why? Am I wrong? Did I miss something? No, it's right. You're just not the first one to solve it. We were going through the archives of published dissertations, and we found one in there. The second problem, he had also solved it. So that individual went and found Dr. Danzig and said, look what I found. Can we publish this together? Short term and long term. All because he didn't know it was impossible. How many recruiters come into your center? How many recruiters come into your station and your battalion? How many do they come into our staff being told by us? We tell them as they come in, they're on fire. I got an E6 Mount Carmel health system, was never told as an E6, there's some things you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be interacting with the chief operating officer. You should not be interacting with the school of nursing presidents. You should not be reacting at that level. You're just an E6 now. He wasn't told he couldn't do it. So all of a sudden I come into a COI engagement, and I thought, well, Sergeant so-and-so is the one who set this up, and I'm going, well, okay. And I walk into a room, and there's the chief operating officer, there's the president of the nursing program, there's the HR director, and this deputy, and 5 other people that had enough letters behind their name to be alphabet soup. And who set this up? The battalion commander? No, sir. The company commander? No. The center? No. Staff sergeant here, who's been on the job 6 months, was never told he couldn't do that. Whereas if he had listened to the wrong people, they would have said, oh, well, that's impossible. You can't do it. You're just a staff sergeant. We taint our own as they come in, because they come in with a fire in their belly of wanting to do their job. And we're part of the problem because we tell them it's too hard. It's impossible. So what I want to do is I want to talk about questioning and reshaping beliefs and where we need to start. I would tell you, analyze if this is you, if this is the staff that works for you, or maybe if this is your boss doing this to you, telling you it can't be done. Lead up. First, we need to be very clear on what we believe right now. After you do it with yourself, you have to do it with those who work around you. When I say be clear, is that if your team is not producing at some level that you would hope them to, is it because they do not believe in it, buy into it? Or is it that they don't believe that they can achieve it, regardless of whether it's been done or not? It's crucial that we know that the beliefs of not only ourselves, but our teammates. You need to recognize the beliefs of those around you. If people do not believe on the goal themselves, it'll probably doesn't matter that if they believe that their personal abilities or not. The goal has to be believed in addition to the abilities of the person. You must be clear on the beliefs that your people hold and which ones might be holding them back. Second thing you must do is you have to influence the beliefs in a way to keep them in check with the reality. And also what the big picture is. Sometimes a constraining belief can be valid. I will never tell one of my children that you can be a brain surgeon, because he can't. I will then want him to work to his fullest capacity, but I will also not give false hope. I will be realistic but challenging. You must also recognize that what that person truly believes, it actually shapes what their own perception of reality is, and it directly impacts the actions that they will take to get after the results that you want them to get. Now here's what we can do if we can get people to deliver better results. We're all of these sometime or one of these. The first one is, do we in ourselves believe in the goal? Or is it just a challenge laid in front of us by someone else because this is where I work? Do you believe in your goals? Do you believe they matter? First question is for ourselves. Second question, do you believe in yourself? Now, after you have answered that, and if it's yes, do the people that you work with or work for or that work for you believe in themselves? By helping them see how their efforts are making a valuable difference, you can show them and get them believing they're capable. And the last one is, do you believe in your leadership? Now, I pondered on this one for a while because some of your leadership might be a little further down, and it might be someone in a section or a center or a battalion, or it might be me. I think every leader should always ask themselves, do the people who work for me believe in me? And if your first thought as a leader is, well, that's not my problem, I would tell you, you have a problem. Every leader at every level should care if someone believes in them. Because the importance of that is when they see that the goals might be too tough, and they might have concerns if they can get themselves there. If they believe in you as a leader, they will then still step out there because they think you will bring them through. So it does matter if your people believe in you. Leadership is there to support, recognize, and encourage when they need it most. I am guilty at every level I have ever led of getting caught up in the absolute hard work of what it takes to get the job done. And not stopping and looking around to see that if I am bringing others along with me, and do they believe in me? I honestly believe the reality is I will never perfect it, but as long as I'm self-aware and keep trying to work at it, it is the weakness that I have personally as a leader, I will continue to improve. So what is your self-awareness? Where do you feel that you could improve on others believing in your leadership? And I'll end with last quote. Miguel de Cervantes says, in order to attain the impossible, one must attempt the absurd. So I'm going to ask you today, is what's in front of you for our mission in the Medical Recruiting Brigade? Is it homework, or is it really impossible? I want to try homework.